Hi everyone, thanks for joining us for today's TrueSight Tech Short. Today we'll be talking about DevOps and what that means for our latest and greatest product, TrueSight Pulse. So with me today I have a couple of great speakers and I'll have them introduce themselves. Mike, do you want to start?
Hi, I'm Michael Moran. I'm one of the product architects at BMC, working exclusively on TrueSight Pulse.
Hi, I'm Patrick Campbell, and I'm with BMC Software, and I'm tech marketing consultant for TrueSight Pulse.
I'm Zachary Schneider. I am operations lead for TrueSight Pulse.
So we hear a lot about different definitions of DevOps. Can you give us an understanding of what really is the distinction?
You know, in my mind, DevOps is you run what you write. So you write it, you run it. Configuration management, Chef and Puppet, that falls under infrastructure as code, which is kind of a separate sort of thing.
Another one of the questions that I had around DevOps was how DevOps teams identify themselves. So, when we try to define DevOps, DevOps is really almost a methodology more than it is a job title. So could you give us a little insight into that?
I don't really think people should identify a DevOps position. I mean, we're all in a team. We're practicing DevOps. Some of us may have different roles, but the idea is more inclusive and collaborative than it is, I'm a DevOps guy.
Yeah, which I think goes to part of that practice of just not throwing things over the wall. It's not somebody else's problem. As Zach said, we're all a team, and I think sharing that burden has been one of the bigger changes that's come out of that movement.
So who's going to love TrueSight Pulse? Who is really the target audience for this solution?
So I think the easiest sell is operations engineers. That's how you could kind of get the whole ball rolling, right? Because usually you start this trend of let's visualize our performance, right? And let's share that. Sharing is important. You can't just have your ops guys install it and not give access to anyone else, right? Mm-hmm. You want everybody to be able to see this data.
Yeah, I think the developers, and that's kind of I think what we were talking about before, is I think we're starting to see a bit of a bridge of that data, and I think that is why developers and the operations are both people that'll really want to use the product. It lets me see things that I may not have seen. So when I do a release or I write some code, we can actually see, did our performance times get better? Are we making more or less calls to our database? These are all things as a developer you may not have had access to. I think Pulse kind of bridges parts of the things that each of those two groups of people wanted.
Right.
You have the ability to see everything happening on your servers as well as all the things happening within your application. And by putting both of those sets of data into one dashboard, you're now kind of solving the problem for each of them and giving them the knowledge that the other may not have had independently. So now when you make that change and you have that second-by-second data, you can see that application request time maybe went too long, or some service like your database is slowing down, or you have more requests that are getting hit and they're uncached, which from a developer point of view probably means you did something wrong. From the operations point of view, you can kind of marry that data together and see what impact happened on my servers. Did the CPU go too high? Do I need more servers? Do I need less? And kind of bridging those two worlds together under that single pane of glass is what TrueSight Pulse does.
Well, it really drives up quality. I mean, the practice drives up quality. There are no walls. Everybody's responsible for what they write, and everybody can help everyone else, resolve those problems.
Yeah, well, as a perfect example, we all share pagers. So every developer and operations person, we rotate pagers to everybody. So you write it, you run it. You're also responsible for monitoring it, and when things go down, you're responsible for fixing it.
And can you give us a little bit of insight into how TrueSight Pulse fits into that picture?
It really kind of fits in a niche in providing the visibility into your stack. And it's pretty much open, so you give access. It's not restricted. So in the past, a lot of people restricted their application metrics to certain people, right? So you create an account and you add your people to your account, and everyone gets to access this newfound visibility into their platform. Um, in addition to that, the product is easy to automate, so it helps facilitate agile methodologies like continuous integration and continuous deployment.
It's one of the big advantages for people who have their infrastructure, in public and private clouds. Specifically if you're with AWS, you might have lots of infrastructure there, and it scales really well, so that you can see your infrastructure with the CloudWatch metrics that TrueSight provides. But then when you need to have that fine-grained visibility, that second-by-second monitoring of, say, a set of web servers or app servers that are in that cloud, you can specifically make that part of your recipe to add the meter to those, and then you get that visibility right away. And I've heard that's going to be very useful for a lot of our customers.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. I think there's two parts to that puzzle. The first is with AWS, you get 5-minute data out of the gate, and you can pay more money for 1-minute data. With the meters, obviously, you can get down to 1 second. But the other thing it does is it lets you bring in metrics from all of your other AWS services that you couldn't run those meters on. So you can pull stuff in from your EBS volumes or your load balancers or RDS, put that together with your second-by-second data, and then, again, get that holistic view of your application and the servers all together at once.
What would you say are the top areas of need that these modern IT teams are trying to solve for that TrueSight Pulse would be a good fit for?
It's one of the great conversations I had with some DevOps folks at our last user conference was that with DevOps, when you continuously roll out changes, multiple times per day, sometimes, bigger organizations do hundreds of changes, and the idea of having that second-by-second visibility so that if something that they just introduced has a change, they can either roll back, with the automation that they have, they can roll back, what kind of infrastructure or whatever setup or code that they've introduced to a more stable environment. And this is the part I think is really neat, is sometimes they're in a delivery stage where they can actually roll it forward and then, again, get that second-by-second so that when they write it and run it, they get quick feedback on whether to roll it back or roll it forward.
We're getting to the point now where with social media or e-advertising, you can create these micro events that create these bursts of variability for your applications. And if you don't have 1 second data, you're really not going to understand why your app is going offline intermittently.
So are we seeing an increase in the number of organizations who really require this 1 second granularity?
Yeah, I think completely. The second is the new minute. We've now turned into something where you can actually see the flapping of a service, or you can see the ups and downs. You can actually see to the second of what actually happened, as opposed to things getting glossed over. And now as more and more customers come to sites and more things are bought online, and we depend more and more on computers, that timing is getting to be even more specific.
Are there specific types of applications that lend themselves to this need for second-by-second monitoring?
I really wouldn't consider launching any sort of online product without it anymore. Even if you're just looking at it from a cost savings perspective, once you get this visibility, you can walk through your stack and find a way to save money in various areas. Because you can actually visualize your usage.
How do you see the infrastructure monitoring space evolving in the next 3 years?
I think infrastructure is going to be more and more on-demand and self-service. I mean, right now, infrastructure is kind of like supplied by traditional IT. Infrastructure had to be so controlled.
So, in regards to infrastructure monitoring, we care about an easy to set up and run solution that we don't really have to manage.
But I think it also goes back to, as infrastructure becomes more of a service you can get online from AWS or places like that, you end up having more of the people that were spending more time just kind of maintaining the servers are now moving more into more of that DevOps space. And so I think by having the cloud keep going as it's going, we're going to start to have more people that are bridging that gap from developers doing more operations and operations doing more development. Because this is something that I use and something that makes my life easier and my job easier. And I think giving that power and that tool to other people is really beneficial.
Thank you so much, Mike, Zachary, and Patrick. I've really enjoyed having you guys walk us through DevOps and what that means for TrueSight Pulse today. Thank you guys so much, and we'll talk to you next time.